Today's objective is 2.3. I can add and subtract unlike fractions, so today's fractions will not have a common denominator. We'll have to make one before we can add or subtract. Alright, here are the steps for adding and subtracting unlike fractions and mixed numbers. So we're going to fill in the blanks. Number one is turn the blank numbers into improper fractions. That's going to be mixed. We're going to turn the mixed numbers into improper fractions. And then step 2 is make a common denominator. Step 3 is to add or subtract the numerators. That means the numbers that are on top. Step 4 is to keep the denominator the same. Denominator. And then step 5 is to simplify. Okay, I'm going to make this bigger so I have more space to write. And then our first example we're going to do is negative 3/5 minus 1/3. And I don't need to make these into improper fractions because they're not mixed numbers, but I do need to make a common denominator. And I can see that 5 and 3 will both go evenly into 15. So I'm going to multiply this one by 5/5 to make 15ths on the bottom, and this one by 3/3 to make 15ths on the bottom. And then 3 times negative 3 is going to be negative 9/15 minus 1 times 5 is 5/15. And then I use my normal addition and subtraction rule, so I'm going to change the sign in the one behind. The denominator in my answer will be 15. And then negative 9 plus negative 5 is negative 14. And then I see if I can simplify, but there's nothing that will go into negative 14 and 15 evenly, so I'm done with that one. The next example is going to be negative 1 3/7 plus 2 1/2. And these ones are mixed numbers, so we do need to make them improper for the first step. So you're going to do 7 times 1 is 7 plus 3 is 10. So I have negative 10/7 plus 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5/2. Now I need to make a common denominator, and so one thing that will always work if you're unsure what the denominator will be is I can multiply this fraction by the denominator over here, so times 7/7, and I can multiply this fraction by the denominator on the other fraction, so times 2/2. 2 times negative 10 will give me negative 20/14, plus 5 times 7 is 35/14. Negative 20 plus 35 is 15/14. So you can leave it like that, or you can change it back into a mixed number, but as long as it's reduced, you're fine. So this would count as the correct final answer, 15/14, or we can also say 14 goes into 15 one time with 1/14 left over. So this would also count as your final answer. Either one would be fine. For our next problem, we're going to do negative 5 1/8 plus 3/4. So these are both mixed numbers, so I have to make them improper. 8 times 5 is 40, plus 1 is 41. So I get negative 41/8 plus 3/4. And then I need to make a common denominator, and I can change fourths into eighths if I multiply the top and bottom by 2, and then I don't need to change the eighth. So I'm going to multiply the top and bottom of 3/4 by 2/2. So I get negative 41/8 plus 6/8. Then I can add. I know my denominator is going to have an 8 on the bottom because I keep the denominator the same when I add fractions. And then on the top I'm going to get negative 41 plus 6 is 35, negative 35. And I can leave it as an improper fraction, or I can change it back into a mixed number and say 8 goes into 35 4 times, so I'm going to put a -4 in the front, and then 8 times 4 is 32, 35 minus 32 is 3, so there's going to be 3/8 left over. Okay, our last problem is going to be Amy hiked 2 3/5 miles and Haley hiked 3 1/3 miles. How much more did Haley hike than Amy? I'm going to have to subtract these two to see how much more Haley hiked than Amy. So I'm going to do 3 1/3, 3 1/3 minus 2 3/5. So my first step is going to be to make them improper. So I'm going to multiply and then add. 3 times 3 is 9 plus 1 is 10 over 3 minus 5 times 2 is 10 plus 3 is 13 over 5. Then I need to make a common denominator, and these will both go into 15ths. So multiply this fraction on the left by 5 over 5, and multiply the fraction on the right by 3 over 3. Whoops. Then I get 50 over 15 minus 13 times 3 is 39 over 15. I keep a 15 in my denominator. 50 minus 39 is 11. And that can't be simplified, so I just leave it as 11/15, but I need units on there. It's 11/15 of a mile. That did not turn out well. Let's do that again. 11/15 of a mile.